It's just a continuation of the interview with Captain Mine. This is actually the fourth part. Sir, you were
okay.
showing us a chart.
I just got done hitting up on the self-esteem part. As far as the love and self-actualization go, like most people, and then I thought you would never get here. But I've seen it. I've seen Iraqis like do things specifically out of a love for a Marine. And I'm talking about like he likes you enough where he's willing to sacrifice something for himself for you. The self-actualization part has really taken place. The last thing I did with the last committee that I had was make the committee, which used to be like get your own money type thing, turn them into a committee that did nothing but recognize what things are wrong with the city and start coordinating with somebody else to make money. Or to make things happen. So in other words, like that committee just started identifying there's a sewer problem here, there's this problem there, like now go fix them. And they would coordinate with the city planners to go do that, inside of my sub-district level. And so getting people to start doing things just because they're the right things to do for other people is where we're going. And you saw it start to happen. But again, if security would have went away, all these things crumbled back down below it. So you always had to take care of each level and make sure each level was trying to progress at the same time, is what we found. This is talking about leadership engagement. I think the one thing important on this brief, and this is a much larger brief, but what we found is our instinct was the more we focus on the people, the safer we are. Like, it was not counterintuitive. I think if we went after the enemy, we would have been less safe. And in this environment, that was important to us. The smaller and more personal, the better. Like, if I can keep it, me and you talking, like, we're better off than a big group with another big group, or my big group with your small group. This is a funny part.
And that second point, smaller is better. Is that in contrast to some of the larger scale operations that the Marines had in Ramadi and Ramadi 1, Bowie?
Yeah, I don't know enough to speak about it. I'm a fan of smaller is better. And what I mean is, smaller groups of Marines interacting with larger groups of Iraqis, things like that. That we've become the critical vulnerability was a hell of a shock, and I didn't come up with this. I'm pretty sure it was my colonel who came up with this statement for the first time. Or he said something like very similar to it. All it means is like the only people who can screw this one up right now is us. Al-Qaeda can't come in strong enough, fast enough, hard enough to screw this one up. We can, though. All it takes us is to stop interacting with the people, stop progressing forward, go back to kinetic, and you lose. Like, you absolutely lose. When I talk about the JSSs, Joint Security Stations, or augmentation teams, my goal here was if it was a police station with a couple Marines living in it, then it was a success. If it was a Marine base with a bunch of Iraqis living in it, then you were a failure. And that was a hell of a concept to get used to. The concept, again, urban cap. Like, we cracked the nut in the sense that you use the police as the main effort. That's your base. That's where you live. You live with the police because they need to have a hardened facility anyway. They're the bastion of the people, keeping things safe. All you're doing is legitimizing them, making them work for the people. And you make sure they're locals, and they're working there, and they're working for the people, and that's urban cap. That's how you make it work. That was the way to crack that cap nut, was using the police as the base unit for your urban, your urban combined action program. And, you did everything out of there. That's where we did our medical, that's where we did our government. We did everything out of those little organizations, but used the police as the base effort. So that was the methodology. Maybe the next level is you move out in town to the government facility. You're no longer with the police. Maybe that's the next level of urban cap. But for us, it was the police as the base effort. I'm gonna close this down and just talk through the last piece. The expansion, because of our success and because of the future ahead, we had to expand. This was the best thing that ever happened to us. And not just us. Like, we were ready to grab more of the city very early on as Lima Company. I wanted more of the city, and I was eager to try and grab as much of the city as I could because we were having such success that people were coming to me from other parts of the city asking me to intervene in their portion of the city. And so having that, like, I knew, like, I was ready. I was ready to take on more of the city. I had decentralized enough to where I could keep doing it. Like, and that's what somebody had told me, like, at one point, goes, how can you control all that? I was like, I don't. I command it. I don't need to control it. I give them an aim point, an intent, and I walk away. And I just inspect that aim point. You know, that's all I do. So, you know, that was the way that worked.
So can you give us a date and a time or a place of conveying intent in that manner?
Every time I had my weekly meetings, do you know what I mean? Like, every time I had my weekly meetings, it would be that type of thing. Let me think, though. I'm sure there's a very specific situation. I remember one. Okay, we kept patrolling through this one area in Azazia where we would get bad atmospherics. Okay, it was bad, and so I walk into Mahika's room, like just like kids maybe throwing rocks. Patrols would come back and say we got evil stares. The kids were acting funny. You know what I mean? Like didn't feel comfortable. This was like within the first month, and so I remember walking into Lieutenant Mahika's room, and I said, "Hey Morrow, come here and look at the map right here. I'm getting some bad atmospherics right here. I want those people to love me." And that was all I said to him. Like 2 weeks later, like those people, you know, would chant your name when you were walking down the street. You know, Morrow just poured everything onto him to make him love him. Mm-hmm. Same thing. Like I would be like, you know, in a meeting, I'd be like, I want you all to work on security. I'll give you another one, another really perfect one, to where like this shows the genius of my commander. At one point,
Lieutenant Colonel Turner.
Lieutenant Colonel Turner, yes. At one point, I'm over at Lieutenant Falk's and we're sitting down and we're talking. We're discussing the future and like what are some concerns of his AO, and he's like, schools are really a concern, and he had a teachers union and he was discussing like schools. Like, okay, hey, at some point find out where all the schools are in your AO, get me some statistics of how many kids aren't going to school so I can start to like gather information to give higher. And so, you know, walk away and about 3 days later, Colonel Turner is like, so what was Sace? So Sace hanging out at the government center, which is outside of my AO. I'm like, he was? You know, and Colonel Turner's like, you didn't know he was there? And I was like, no, sir, I didn't. You know what I mean? And he was like, I was looking at a school that's inside the government center and was trying to get it open. I'm like, oh, makes perfect sense. I was talking about schools, trying to figure out where the schools were, so he's probably just crossing boundaries because it's across the street to figure it out. And my colonel goes, that's perfect. And I was just like, I mean, you wouldn't expect to hear that out of the majority of the colonels in the Marine Corps. How can you not know where your units are? How can you not control this organization? How can you not be more of a second-generation officer? You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're saying when you say those things. But, I mean, how many times is it, oh, you don't know where your Marines are, Lieutenant? Real good. Real good. You know, like, how many times do you hear that stuff? But Colonel Turner was like, that's wonderful. Like, that's initiative-based tactics. That's you just telling a subordinate to do something, he goes and does it. How many colonels in the Marine Corps would reward you for doing that? I mean, I can't name many. And that, like, by him being that way allowed me to be that way more. To where I could give you initiative, walk away, come back, and be like, where did this goddamn playground came from? Well, sir, I know I was supposed to stay inside of this, but I made a deal if I fixed this trash, he would build a playground too. Okay, so you took care of sanitation and got a bonus. You're in the box.
And it's notable, Colonel Dobson, who was a battalion commander for 3-7, our last battalion commander, is now, you know, he's written a couple of the articles in the Gazette on distributed operations. And so he might appreciate, you know, the current 3-7 battalion commanders has kind of exemplified some leadership qualities necessary to implement distributed operations.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would love to talk to the DO guys because that's what we did. You can say what you want. I had 7 different sites with 10 people at them. You know, like we were doing DO, you know, without anybody giving us the equipment to do it.
DO?
Distributed ops.
Distributed operations.
Yeah. You know, so when the expansion happened, what was really awesome about the expansion was Lima Company was already set. Like Lima Company was ready to expand and aching to expand. And the other commanders had to do the same because we were pulling battalions out of Ramadi. Yeah. So we were pulling out 2-5, 9th Army was leaving. So it was like, people were like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And I remember sitting down with the commanders and being like, hey, like you only need 11 guys at each thing. Like, oh, how could you say 11 guys? You don't know what it looks like. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like the Iraqis are providing your security.